In 1956, a steel worker's wife in Pittsburgh fed 12 people every Sunday with one cast iron pan and a pot roast that cost 43 cents a pound. She didn't measure. She didn't follow a recipe. She'd been doing it since she was 9 years old, watching her mother do the same thing in the same pan. That pan is in a thrift store now. The recipe died with her in 2019. And 24 other Sunday dinners just like hers, the kind that fed entire neighborhoods on a single paycheck, disappeared from American kitchens after 1965. Today, we're bringing back all 25. Number 19 used a single chicken to feed 15 people. Number 24 was so cheap, factory wives traded the recipe like currency. And number 7? The Catholic Church actually banned it from parish cookbooks in 1962. You won't find these in any cookbook printed after 1970. Let's start with number 1. Sunday pot roast ruled every American kitchen in the 1950s, and no Sunday dinner felt complete without it sitting in the center of the table. She made it in the heavy Dutch oven, the one with the chipped enamel lid and the dark stains baked into the bottom from years of Sunday cooking. A 3-pound chuck roast went in first, seared brown on all sides in a little oil until the kitchen smelled like iron and salt and something deeper. Then she added quartered potatoes with the skin still on, thick carrot chunks cut by hand, a whole onion sliced in wedges, a cup of water from the tap, salt, pepper, nothing else. The lid went on tight and stayed on. The oven ran at 325 degrees for 3 hours while the family got dressed for church and came back home. By noon, the house smelled like Sunday, and everyone knew what was waiting. The roast came out so tender it fell apart when she touched it with a fork, and the vegetables soaked up every bit of flavor from the beef and the drippings at the bottom. She served it straight from the Dutch oven onto the good plates and poured the thick gravy over everything while it was still steaming hot. The kids sat quiet and still until she said grace. What they remember today isn't just the taste or the tenderness, it's the pot with the chipped lid, the smell filling every room, the waiting while she carved it at the table. Her. Sunday beef roast showed up on tables across America every single week in the 1950s, and mothers knew exactly how to make it without a recipe or a thermometer. She used the big oval roasting pan, the one with the handles worn smooth from being pulled in and out of the oven for 20 years. A 4-pound beef roast went in the center, rubbed all over with salt, pepper, and a little garlic powder if she had it. She surrounded it with whole peeled potatoes, carrot sticks, onion halves, and sometimes celery stalks broken in half. A cup of beef broth or water went into the bottom, and she covered the whole thing tight with aluminum foil so nothing dried out. The oven stayed at 350 degrees for 2.5 hours, and nobody opened that door until the timer rang. The smell started slow and then took over the whole house by the time church let out. When she pulled it out, the roast was brown on the outside and pink in the middle, and the vegetables were soft enough to cut with a spoon. She let it rest on the counter for 10 minutes before slicing it thin against the grain and laying the slices on the serving platter with the vegetables piled around the edges. The juice from the bottom of the pan became the gravy, and she poured it over everything right before she called everyone to the table. What they remember now isn't just how it tasted. It's the roasting pan with the worn handles, the foil peeled back, the slicing at the counter, her. If you remember these two, you know what Sunday smelled like. Stay with us till the end and see which one you loved the most.
Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue.
Sunday roast chicken was the meal every mother knew how to make in the 1950s, and it filled the house with a smell that meant family and rest and something good waiting. She made it in the black roasting pan, the one with the rack inside that lifted the chicken off the bottom so the heat could get all around it. A whole chicken went in, rinsed under cold water, and patted dry with a kitchen towel. She rubbed the skin with softened butter, then sprinkled salt, pepper, and a little paprika over the top until it looked golden even before it went in the oven. Quartered potatoes and carrot chunks went into the bottom of the pan under the rack and soaked up all the drippings while the chicken cooked. The oven ran at 375 degrees for an hour and a half, and she basted it twice with a big spoon, spooning the fat and juice from the bottom back over the skin. When it came out, the skin was crispy and dark, and the meat underneath stayed juicy and tender. She let it rest on the counter for 10 minutes while she made gravy from the drippings in the pan, and then she carved it at the table in front of everyone. The kids fought over the drumsticks and the crispy skin, and nobody left the table hungry. What they remember today isn't just how good it tasted or how the skin cracked when you bit into it. It's the black roasting pan, the basting spoon, the carving at the table. Her. Before we continue. Swiss steak sat on Sunday tables all through the 1950s, and mothers made it when they wanted something tender and rich without spending much money or time standing over the stove. She made it in the deep cast-iron skillet, the one with the handle wrapped in a dish towel because it got too hot to touch. Round steak went in first, pounded flat with the edge of a plate until it was thin and broken down. She dredged each piece in flour mixed with salt and pepper and then seared them hard in a little oil until both sides were brown and crusty. Then she added sliced onions, a can of crushed tomatoes, a splash of water, and a pinch of sugar to cut the acid. The lid went on, and the skillet sat on low heat for 2 hours while everything broke down into something soft and thick. The meat came out so tender you could cut it with a fork, and the tomato gravy turned dark and rich and soaked into everything on the plate. She served it over mashed potatoes or white rice and poured extra gravy from the skillet over the top. The table stayed quiet while everyone ate, and someone always asked for seconds. What they remember now isn't just the flavor or how filling it was. It's the cast-iron skillet, the smell of tomatoes cooking down, the fork cutting through meat with no knife. Her. Sunday turkey wasn't just for Thanksgiving in the 1950s, and mothers roasted whole birds on regular Sundays when they wanted to feed a crowd or make something last through the week. She used the biggest roasting pan in the house, the one that barely fit in the oven and had to go on the bottom rack. A 10-pound turkey went in, rinsed inside and out, and patted dry with old kitchen towels. She rubbed the skin with butter and sprinkled salt, pepper, and sage all over the outside and inside the cavity. Chopped onions, celery, and carrots went into the bottom of the pan with a cup of water, and she covered everything with a tent of aluminum foil so the skin wouldn't burn. The oven stayed at 325 degrees for 3.5 hours, and she basted it every 45 minutes with the drippings from the bottom. When it came out, the skin was golden brown and crispy, and the meat stayed moist all the way through. She let it rest for 20 minutes before carving it at the table, while everyone watched and waited with their plates ready. The legs and wings went to the kids, and the breast meat got sliced thin and passed around. What they remember now isn't just how much food came from one bird or how good the leftovers were the next day. It's the roasting pan that barely fit, the basting every hour, the carving ceremony at the table. Her. 5 dinners down, and every one of them cooked in a single pan while the family got ready for Sunday. Sunday, pot roast. Sunday, beef roast. Sunday, roast chicken. Swiss steak. Sunday, turkey. Each one fed a family with no fuss and no waste. 20 more are coming. Number 24 fed 12 with 1 cut of beef. Beef brisket sat on Sunday tables when mothers wanted something that cooked itself and came out tender enough to pull apart with a fork. She made it in the big blue speckled roasting pan, the one with the lid that sealed tight and kept all the steam and flavor locked inside. A 4-pound brisket went in fat side up, rubbed all over with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder until every inch was covered. She poured a bottle of chili sauce and a cup of water over the top and added thick slices of onion all around the sides. The lid went on, and the pan went into a 300-degree oven for 4 hours, and nobody opened it once. The smell started after the first hour, and by the time church ended, the whole house smelled like beef and spice and something slow-cooked and deep. When she pulled it out, the brisket was so tender it fell apart when she lifted it with a fork, and the sauce in the bottom turned thick and dark and perfect for spooning over sliced meat. She let it rest for 15 minutes and then sliced it thin against the grain and laid every piece on the platter with the onions and sauce poured over the top. The table stayed quiet while everyone ate because the meat melted in your mouth and the sauce soaked into everything. What they remember now isn't just the flavor. It's the blue roasting pan, the sealed lid, the slicing against the grain. Her. Stuffed chicken showed up on Sunday tables when mothers wanted to make something special without roasting a whole turkey or spending all morning in the kitchen. She made it in the rectangular baking dish, the one with the glass sides, so you could see the stuffing puffing up while it cooked. A whole chicken went in the center, rinsed and dried and opened up so the stuffing could go inside. The stuffing was simple: dried bread cubes, chopped celery, chopped onion, melted butter, chicken broth, salt, pepper, and sage mixed together in a big bowl until everything stuck together. She packed it loosely into the cavity of the chicken and tied the legs together with kitchen string so nothing fell out. The outside got rubbed with butter and sprinkled with salt and paprika, and then the whole thing went into a 375-degree oven for an hour and 45 minutes. The stuffing cooked inside the bird and soaked up all the juices while the skin turned golden and crispy. When it came out, she let it rest on the counter and then carved it at the table, scooping the stuffing out first and piling it on a serving plate before slicing the chicken. Everyone got a piece of chicken and a big spoonful of stuffing, and nobody complained about anything. What they remember now isn't just how moist the chicken stayed or how flavorful the stuffing was. It's the glass baking dish, the tied legs, the scooping of stuffing at the table. Her. Roast leg of lamb sat on the most special Sunday tables in the 1950s, and mothers only made it when they wanted to serve something different and impressive without too much extra work. She used the heavy black roasting pan, the one with the high sides and the rack that kept the meat lifted so the heat could reach every part. A 5-pound leg of lamb went on the rack, rubbed all over with olive oil, crushed garlic, salt, pepper, and dried rosemary, until the whole thing smelled like a garden. She added quartered potatoes and whole carrots around the bottom and poured a cup of water into the pan so nothing burned. The oven stayed at 350 degrees for 2 hours, and she didn't open the door once during the first hour. When she did check it, she basted the lamb with the drippings from the bottom and let it finish cooking until the outside was brown and crusty and the inside stayed pink and tender. She pulled it out and let it rest for 20 minutes while she made gravy from the drippings, and the family sat down at the table. She carved it thin and served each slice with roasted potatoes and carrots and a spoonful of gravy poured over the top. The taste was rich and different, and everyone remembered it long after the meal ended. What they remember now isn't just the flavor or how fancy it felt. It's the black roasting pan, the smell of rosemary, the carving of something special. Her. Baked ham dinner filled Sunday tables when mothers wanted something sweet and savory that didn't need much attention once it went into the oven. She made it in the big rectangular roasting pan, the one with the handles on both ends and the scratches on the bottom from years of scraping and serving. A 7-pound turkey roast went in the center because real ham wasn't halal, but the glaze made it taste just as good. She scored the top in a diamond pattern with a sharp knife and stuck whole cloves into each diamond so the flavor went deep. The glaze was simple: brown sugar, mustard, and pineapple juice mixed together in a bowl and brushed all over the top and sides until everything glistened. Canned pineapple rings went on top and got pinned down with toothpicks, and the whole thing went into a 325-degree oven for 2 hours. Every 30 minutes she pulled it out and brushed more glaze over the top so it built up into a thick, shiny coating. When it came out, the top was caramelized and sticky, and the smell filled every room in the house. She let it rest and then sliced it thin at the table, serving each piece with a pineapple ring on top. The glaze dripped onto the plates, and everyone soaked it up with rolls or potatoes. What they remember now isn't just how sweet and savory it tasted. It's the roasting pan with two handles, the cloves stuck in diamonds, the pineapple rings, her. Chicken divan sat on Sunday tables when mothers wanted something creamy and rich that looked fancy but came together in one pan without much fuss. She made it in the white ceramic baking dish, the one with the scalloped edges and the crack along one side that never got worse. Frozen broccoli went into the bottom first, thawed and drained so it didn't make the dish watery. Cooked chicken pieces went on top, either left over from Saturday or a whole chicken she boiled that morning and shredded by hand. The sauce was the magic: cream of chicken soup, mayonnaise, a squeeze of lemon juice, and a little curry powder whisked together in a bowl until it was smooth and thick. She poured it over the chicken and broccoli and then covered everything with shredded cheddar cheese and a handful of breadcrumbs mixed with melted butter. The whole thing went into a 350-degree oven for 35 minutes until the top turned golden and bubbly and the sauce thickened up underneath. When she pulled it out, the smell was rich and creamy, and everyone wanted a scoop before it even cooled. She served it straight from the baking dish onto plates, and the cheese stretched when you lifted your fork. What they remember now isn't just how creamy and comforting it was or how the breadcrumbs added crunch. It's the white ceramic dish with the crack, the bubbly cheese on top, the scooping at the table. Her. 10. Sunday dinners, and every one of them cooked in a single pan while the oven did the work. Beef brisket, stuffed chicken, roast leg of lamb, baked ham dinner, chicken divan. Not one of them required fancy ingredients or complicated steps. 15 more coming. Number 24 is the one nobody forgot. Pot roasted chicken sat on Sunday tables when mothers wanted all the flavor of a roast without turning on the oven or heating up the whole kitchen on a warm day. She made it in the big cast-iron Dutch oven, the one with the heavy lid that sealed so tight no steam escaped, and the black interior that never needed scrubbing because it was seasoned from decades of cooking. A whole chicken went in first, rinsed under cold water and patted completely dry with old dish towels so the skin would brown instead of steam. She rubbed the outside with softened butter and then sprinkled salt, pepper, paprika, and garlic powder all over until every inch was covered and the skin glistened under the kitchen light. The Dutch oven sat on the stovetop over medium-high heat, and she seared the chicken on all sides until the skin turned golden brown and the kitchen smelled like butter and salt and something rich. Then she added quartered potatoes with the skin still on, thick carrot chunks cut by hand, a whole onion sliced into wedges, and a few celery stalks broken in half and tossed around the chicken. She poured in a cup of chicken broth from a can and added a bay leaf and a sprig of fresh thyme if she had it growing near the back door. The lid went on, and the heat dropped to low, and the pot sat there on the stove for 2 hours while the family got ready for church and came back home. The chicken cooked in its own steam and juices, and the vegetables soaked up every bit of flavor from the broth and the drippings. By the time she lifted the lid, the meat was falling off the bone, and the skin stayed tender, and the broth in the bottom turned into a rich gravy thick enough to coat a spoon. She pulled the chicken out carefully with 2 forks so it didn't fall apart and set it on the serving platter surrounded by all the vegetables. The broth got poured into a gravy boat and passed around the table so everyone could spoon it over their chicken and potatoes. The table stayed quiet except for the sound of forks scraping plates and someone asking to pass the gravy one more time. What they remember now, 50 years later, isn't just how tender the chicken was, or how the vegetables melted in your mouth, or how the gravy soaked into everything on the plate. Beef short ribs showed up on Sunday tables when mothers wanted something rich and falling off the bone tender that made the whole house smell like a steakhouse without spending steakhouse money. She made it in the deep enamel roasting pan, the one with the cream-colored inside and the dark blue outside, and the chips along the rim from being pulled in and out of the oven too many times over too many years. 4 pounds of beef short ribs went into the pan, bone side down, each piece thick and meaty and marbled with fat that would melt down into the sauce. She seasoned every piece with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, and then seared them in a hot skillet on the stovetop until all sides were brown and crusty before transferring them into the roasting pan. Then she added sliced onions, chopped carrots, chopped celery, and a few whole garlic cloves smashed with the side of a knife. A can of crushed tomatoes went in next, along with a cup of beef broth, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a bay leaf, and a pinch of sugar to balance the acid from the tomatoes. She stirred everything together so the ribs were surrounded by vegetables and sauce, and then covered the whole pan tight with aluminum foil so nothing dried out. The oven ran at 300 degrees for 3.5 hours, and she didn't open it once, because low and slow was the only way to break down the meat and turn the connective tissue into something tender and rich. The smell started after the first hour, and by the time the family came home from church, the whole house smelled like beef and tomatoes and something that had been cooking all morning. When she pulled the pan out, the meat was so tender it slid off the bone when you touched it with a fork, and the sauce in the bottom was thick and dark and glossy. She served the ribs straight from the pan onto plates and spooned the vegetables and sauce over the top and passed around a bowl of mashed potatoes so everyone could soak up the extra gravy. The bones got piled on a side plate, and someone always fought over the last rib. What they remember now isn't just the taste or the tenderness or how the sauce clung to everything. Chicken cacciatore sat on Sunday tables when mothers wanted something with a little Italian flair that still cooked in one pan and didn't require ingredients they couldn't find at the corner grocery store. She made it in the big cast-iron skillet, the one with the sloped sides and the handle that got too hot to touch without wrapping it in a folded dish towel. Chicken pieces went in first, a whole chicken cut up into 8 pieces with the skin still on and the bones still in, because that's where all the flavor lived. She seasoned every piece with salt and pepper, and then seared them in hot oil until the skin turned golden and crispy and stuck to the bottom of the pan just a little. Then she pulled the chicken out and set it on a plate while she cooked the vegetables in the same pan with all the drippings and brown bits stuck to the bottom. Sliced onions went in first and cooked until they turned soft and sweet. Then sliced bell peppers, sliced mushrooms, and minced garlic followed, and everything cooked together until the kitchen smelled like an Italian restaurant. A can of crushed tomatoes went in next, along with a half cup of red wine or chicken broth. If she didn't have wine, a tablespoon of tomato paste, a bay leaf, dried oregano, dried basil, and a pinch of sugar to cut the acid. She stirred everything together and scraped up all the brown bits from the bottom of the pan, and then nestled the chicken pieces back into the sauce skin, side up so they stayed crispy on top. The skillet went into a 350-degree oven, uncovered for 45 minutes, and the sauce bubbled around the edges and thickened while the chicken finished cooking and stayed moist. When she pulled it out, the chicken was tender and the sauce was rich and thick and clung to every piece. She served it straight from the skillet onto plates with a big spoonful of sauce and vegetables over the top and a side of buttered noodles or crusty bread to soak up the extra sauce. The table filled with the smell of tomatoes and herbs and garlic, and nobody talked much until their plate was empty. Turkey breast dinner showed up on Sunday tables when mothers wanted the taste of Thanksgiving without roasting a whole bird or spending all day in the kitchen basting and checking and worrying. She made it in the oval roasting pan, the one with the rack inside, that lifted the turkey breast off the bottom, so the heat reached every side and the skin crisped up instead of sitting in its own juices. A 5-pound bone-in turkey breast went on the rack, skin side up, rinsed under cold water, and patted completely dry with paper towels so the butter would stick and the skin would brown. She rubbed the skin all over with softened butter and then sprinkled salt, pepper, garlic powder, and a little poultry seasoning across the top until everything was covered. Quartered red potatoes, thick carrot chunks, and halved onions went into the bottom of the pan under the rack and soaked up all the drippings while the turkey cooked above them. She poured a cup of chicken broth into the bottom so the vegetables didn't burn, and added a few sprigs of fresh rosemary and thyme, if she had them. The pan went into a 350-degree oven uncovered and stayed there for 2 hours, and she basted it 3 times with the drippings from the bottom using a long-handled spoon. The smell started slow and then took over the house, and by the time the family sat down at the table, everyone was already hungry. When she pulled it out, the skin was golden brown and crispy, and the meat underneath stayed juicy and white and tender all the way through. She let it rest on the counter for 15 minutes while she made gravy from the drippings in the bottom of the pan, whisking in a little flour and scraping up all the browned bits stuck to the sides. Then she carved the turkey breast at the table in front of everyone, slicing it thin against the grain and laying each piece on the serving platter with the roasted vegetables piled around the edges. Crown roast of beef sat on the fanciest Sunday tables in the 1950s when mothers wanted to make something that looked like it came from a restaurant, but still cooked in one pan without complicated steps or ingredients they didn't already have. She made it in the largest roasting pan in the house, the one that only came out a few times a year for Christmas or Easter or when company was coming and she wanted to impress. A crown roast of beef went in the center, standing upright with the bones Frenched and tied together in a circle, so it looked like a crown with the meat on the outside and an empty space in the middle. She rubbed the outside with softened butter and then covered every inch with salt, pepper, and garlic powder until the meat glistened under the kitchen light. The inside of the crown got filled with a simple stuffing made from dried bread cubes, chopped onion, chopped celery, melted butter, beef broth, salt, pepper, and a little dried thyme mixed together in a big bowl until everything stuck together. She packed it loosely into the center of the crown and mounted it up so it looked full and impressive. Quartered potatoes and whole carrots went around the outside of the roast in the bottom of the pan, and she poured a cup of beef broth over everything so the vegetables didn't dry out. The pan went into a 350-degree oven uncovered for 2.5 hours, and she didn't open the door once during the first hour. When she did check it, she basted the roast with the drippings from the bottom and let it finish cooking until the outside was brown and crusty and the inside stayed pink and juicy. She pulled it out and let it rest on the counter for 20 minutes while the family gathered around the table and stared at it because it looked too fancy to eat. Sunday dinners, and not one of them required more than a single pan or ingredients you couldn't find at the corner store. Pot-roasted chicken, beef short ribs, chicken cacciatore, turkey breast dinner, crown roast of beef. Everyone fed a family. 10 more coming. Number 24 is still the one. Stuffed turkey sat on Sunday tables when mothers wanted to serve something special that felt like Thanksgiving in the middle of spring or summer without all the extra dishes and sides. She made it in the biggest roasting pan she owned, the one with the high sides and the handles on both ends that required 2 hands to lift when it was full. A 12-pound whole turkey went in the center, rinsed inside and out under cold water and patted dry with old kitchen towels so the skin would crisp up instead of steaming. The stuffing went in first, packed loosely into the cavity until it was full but not tight because it needed room to expand while it cooked. The stuffing was simple: dried bread cubes torn into pieces, chopped onion, chopped celery, melted butter, chicken broth, salt, pepper, dried sage, and a beaten egg mixed together in a big bowl until everything was moist but not soggy. She tied the legs together with kitchen string so the stuffing stayed inside and tucked the wings under the body so they didn't burn. The outside of the turkey got rubbed all over with softened butter and then sprinkled with salt, pepper, and paprika until the skin turned golden, even before it went into the oven. She added quartered potatoes and thick carrot chunks around the turkey in the bottom of the pan and poured 2 cups of chicken broth over everything so the vegetables cooked in the drippings. A tent of aluminum foil went over the top so the skin wouldn't burn, and the pan went into a 325-degree oven for 4 hours. Every hour she pulled it out and basted the turkey with the drippings from the bottom using a long spoon and checked to make sure the foil wasn't touching the skin. During the last 30 minutes, she pulled the foil off completely so the skin could brown and crisp. Yankee pot roast ruled Sunday tables across New England and the Midwest in the 1950s, and mothers made it when they wanted something hearty and filling that cooked low and slow and filled the house with the smell of beef and vegetables. She made it in the heavy enameled Dutch oven, the one with the tight-fitting lid and the cream-colored inside that never stained, no matter how many roasts she cooked in it. A 4-pound chuck roast went in first, patted dry with paper towels and seasoned all over with salt and pepper. She seared it hard in hot oil on all sides until a dark brown crust formed and the kitchen smelled like a steakhouse. Then she pulled the roast out and set it on a plate while she cooked the vegetables in the same pot with all the drippings and browned bits stuck to the bottom. Sliced onions went in first and cooked until they softened and turned golden. Then minced garlic followed and cooked just until it smelled sweet and sharp. She added a cup of beef broth and a cup of red wine, or more broth if she didn't have wine, and scraped up all the brown bits from the bottom with a wooden spoon. The roast went back into the pot, along with quartered potatoes, thick carrot chunks, halved turnips, and a few celery stalks broken in half. She added a bay leaf, a sprig of fresh thyme, and a tablespoon of tomato paste, stirred into the liquid. The lid went on tight, and the pot went into a 300-degree oven for 3.5 hours, and nobody opened it once, because low and slow was the only way to make the meat tender enough to fall apart. The smell started after the first hour and stayed in the house all afternoon. When she pulled it out, the roast was so tender you could cut it with a fork, and the vegetables were soft and sweet, and the liquid in the bottom had turned into a thick, glossy gravy. She served it straight from the Dutch oven, slicing the roast into thick pieces and spooning vegetables and gravy over the top. The table stayed quiet while everyone ate, because the flavor was deep and rich and every bite was tender. Sunday baked chicken sat on tables all across America in the 1950s when mothers wanted something simple and foolproof that didn't require a recipe or constant checking. She made it in the rectangular glass baking dish, the one with the handles molded into the sides and the corners that were impossible to scrub clean after years of baking. Chicken pieces went into the dish in a single layer, a whole chicken cut into 8 pieces with the skin on and the bones in, because that's what kept everything moist and flavorful. She arranged them skin side up so the fat would render and the skin would crisp, and seasoned every piece with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and a little paprika for color. Then she added quartered potatoes with the skin still on, thick slices of onion, and whole baby carrots around the chicken so everything cooked together in one pan. She drizzled melted butter over the top of everything and poured a half cup of chicken broth into the bottom of the dish so the vegetables wouldn't stick and the drippings would turn into a sauce. The dish went into a 375-degree oven, uncovered, and stayed there for 1 hour and 15 minutes while the chicken roasted and the skin turned golden and crispy. Halfway through, she pulled it out and basted the chicken with the drippings from the bottom, using a spoon, and flipped the potatoes so they browned on both sides. The smell of butter and chicken fat and roasting vegetables filled the house, and by the time the family sat down, everyone was ready to eat. When she pulled it out, the chicken was cooked all the way through, and the skin was crispy, and the potatoes were soft on the inside and browned on the outside. She served it straight from the glass dish onto plates and spooned the drippings and vegetables over the top. The table was set with the good plates and cloth napkins, and nobody left the table hungry or unsatisfied. What they remember now, 50 years later, isn't just how easy it was or how good everything tasted together or how the skin cracked when you bit into it. It's the rectangular glass baking dish with the molded handles, the butter drizzled over the top, the basting halfway through, the serving straight from the oven. Roast beef and Yorkshire pudding sat on the fanciest Sunday tables in the 1950s when mothers wanted to make something traditional and impressive that came from England but worked perfectly in an American oven. She made it in the big black roasting pan, the one with the high sides and the rack that lifted the roast so the heat reached every side and the drippings collected in the bottom. A 5-pound rib roast went on the rack fat side up, rubbed all over with salt, pepper, and a little garlic powder until the outside was covered and ready to form a crust. The oven ran at 450 degrees for the first 20 minutes to sear the outside, and then she dropped it down to 325 degrees for the next 2 hours. She didn't open the oven once during that time because every time the door opened, the temperature dropped and the roast took longer to cook. While the roast finished, she made the Yorkshire pudding batter in a bowl. Flour, eggs, milk, and a pinch of salt whisked together until it was smooth and thin like pancake batter. When the roast came out, she let it rest on the counter covered with foil and cranked the oven back up to 450 degrees. She poured half a cup of the hot beef drippings from the roasting pan into a muffin tin, filling each cup with a little puddle of fat, and put the tin into the oven for 5 minutes until the fat was smoking hot. Then she pulled it out and poured the batter into each cup, filling them halfway, and put the tin back into the oven for 20 minutes without opening the door. The Yorkshire puddings puffed up tall and golden and crispy on the outside and soft on the inside, and the whole kitchen smelled like beef and butter. She carved the roast at the table into thick slices and served each person a slice of beef and 2 Yorkshire puddings with a spoonful of the drippings poured over the top. The puddings soaked up the gravy, and the beef was tender and pink in the middle. What they remember now isn't just how the flavors worked together or how impressive it looked on the table. It's the black roasting pan, the muffin tin with smoking fat, the Yorkshire puddings puffing up. Chicken and dressing bake sat on Sunday tables when mothers wanted all the flavors of Thanksgiving stuffing and roast chicken in one pan without roasting a whole bird or making a dozen side dishes. She made it in the big rectangular casserole dish, the one with the glass sides and the lid that never quite fit right, but still sealed enough to trap the steam. The dressing went into the bottom first, a full pan of cornbread baked the day before and crumbled into pieces, mixed with dried bread cubes, chopped onion, chopped celery, melted butter, chicken broth, beaten eggs, salt, pepper, dried sage, and a little poultry seasoning. She stirred it all together in a big bowl until everything was moist but not soggy, and then pressed it into the bottom of the casserole dish in an even layer. Chicken pieces went on top, a whole chicken cut into 8 pieces with the skin on and the bones in, arranged in a single layer so every piece touched the dressing underneath. She seasoned the chicken with salt, pepper, and paprika, and drizzled melted butter over the top so the skin would brown and crisp. A cup of chicken broth got poured around the edges of the dish so the dressing stayed moist, and the drippings from the chicken mixed into the broth while everything cooked. The lid went on, and the dish went into a 350-degree oven for an hour. After an hour, she pulled the lid off so the chicken skin could crisp and let it cook uncovered for another 30 minutes. The smell of sage and butter and roasting chicken filled the house, and everyone knew what was waiting. When she pulled it out, the chicken was golden and tender, and the dressing underneath was moist and flavorful and soaked with all the drippings from the chicken. She served it straight from the casserole dish, lifting each piece of chicken out with a spatula and scooping a big spoonful of dressing onto the plate next to it. The dressing had a crust on top where it touched the edges of the dish, and everyone fought over those crispy corners. What they remember now isn't just how the chicken stayed moist or how the dressing tasted like Thanksgiving or how everything cooked together in one dish. It's the rectangular casserole dish with the loose lid, the dressing pressed into the bottom, the chicken on top. Sunday dinners, and not a single one required more than 1 pan or a degree from cooking school. Stuffed turkey, Yankee pot roast, Sunday baked chicken, roast beef, and Yorkshire pudding. Chicken and dressing bake. Everyone fed a family and left the kitchen clean. 5 more coming. Number 24 fed 12. Sunday sauerbraten showed up on German-American tables in the 1950s when mothers wanted to make something traditional that connected them to the old country but still worked in an American kitchen with American ingredients. She made it in the heavy enameled Dutch oven, the one with the dark red outside and the cream-colored inside that had cooked 100 roasts before this one. The roast started 3 days earlier when she took a 4-pound beef rump roast and put it into a big bowl with sliced onions, whole cloves, bay leaves, peppercorns, and a marinade made from equal parts red wine vinegar and water with a tablespoon of sugar stirred in. She covered the bowl with a plate and put it in the refrigerator and turned it over once a day, so every side soaked in the marinade. On Sunday morning, she pulled the roast out and patted it dry with paper towels and saved the marinade in a bowl. She seared the roast hard in hot oil on all sides until it was dark brown and crusty, and then pulled it out and set it on a plate. The onions from the marinade went into the same pot and cooked until they softened, and then she added the marinade back in along with a handful of ginger snap cookies crushed into crumbs. The roast went back into the pot, and the lid went on tight, and the pot sat on low heat on the stovetop for 3 hours while the meat broke down and the sauce thickened from the ginger snaps. The smell was sharp and sweet and tangy and filled the whole house. When it was done, the roast was so tender it fell apart when you touched it, and the sauce was thick and glossy and dark. She sliced it thin and served it on a platter with the sauce spooned over the top and a side of boiled potatoes or egg noodles to soak up the extra sauce. The flavor was rich and complex and tangy and sweet all at once, and nobody had ever tasted anything like it unless their grandmother made it the same way. What they remember now isn't just the flavor or how tender the meat was. It's the 3 days of marinating, the enameled Dutch oven, the ginger snaps in the sauce. Chicken paprikash sat on Hungarian-American tables in the 1950s when mothers wanted to make something rich and creamy and full of flavor that reminded them of home but didn't require ingredients they couldn't find at the corner grocery. She made it in the big cast-iron skillet, the one with the sloped sides and the handle wrapped in a folded dish towel because it got too hot to touch. Chicken pieces went in first, a whole chicken cut into 8 pieces with the skin on and the bones in, seasoned with salt and pepper and seared in hot oil until the skin turned golden and crispy. Then she pulled the chicken out and set it on a plate, while she cooked the onions in the same skillet with all the drippings and brown bits stuck to the bottom. Sliced onions went in and cooked low and slow until they turned soft and sweet and golden brown, and the kitchen smelled like butter and sugar. Then she added 3 tablespoons of sweet Hungarian paprika and stirred it into the onions and let it cook for just a minute until it smelled toasted and deep. A cup of chicken broth went in next, and she scraped up all the browned bits from the bottom with a wooden spoon. The chicken pieces went back into the skillet, nestled into the onions and paprika sauce, and the lid went on, and everything simmered on low heat for 45 minutes until the chicken was tender and cooked through. Then she pulled the chicken out again and stirred a cup of sour cream into the sauce and let it warm through without boiling, because boiling would make the sour cream separate and turn grainy. The chicken went back in for just a minute to heat through, and then everything was ready. She served it straight from the skillet onto plates with a big spoonful of the paprika sauce and sour cream spooned over the top, and a side of buttered egg noodles or boiled potatoes to soak up the sauce. The flavor was rich and creamy and slightly sweet from the paprika, and the sour cream added a tangy bite that balanced everything. What they remember now isn't just the flavor, or the creamy sauce, or how the chicken stayed moist. It's the cast-iron skillet, the smell of paprika toasting, the sour cream stirred in at the end. Her. Sunday baked salmon sat on tables along the coasts and near the Great Lakes in the 1950s when mothers wanted to serve something different from beef or chicken that was still simple and elegant and cooked in one pan. She made it in the rectangular glass baking dish, the one with the handles molded into the sides and the scratch along the bottom from someone cutting into it with a knife. A whole side of salmon went into the dish skin side down. A 3-pound piece that stretched from one end of the dish to the other. She patted it dry with paper towels and then rubbed the top with softened butter and seasoned it all over with salt, pepper, a squeeze of lemon juice, and a handful of fresh dill if she had it, or dried dill if she didn't. Thin lemon slices went on top of the salmon in a row from end to end, and she dotted the whole thing with little pats of butter. Quartered red potatoes and whole green beans went into the dish around the salmon, and she drizzled everything with olive oil and sprinkled more salt and pepper over the vegetables. A half cup of white wine or chicken broth went into the bottom of the dish so nothing stuck and the flavors mixed together while everything cooked. The dish went into a 375-degree oven uncovered for 25 minutes, and she set a timer because salmon could go from perfect to dry in just a few minutes. When the timer rang, she pulled it out and checked the thickest part of the salmon with a fork, and if it flaked easily, it was done. The salmon came out moist and tender, and the butter and lemon and dill made it taste bright and fresh, and the vegetables were soft and coated in all the buttery drippings from the fish. She served it straight from the baking dish, lifting each portion with a spatula and making sure everyone got a few lemon slices and a scoop of vegetables. The table stayed quiet while everyone ate because the flavor was delicate and clean and different from the heavy roasts and casseroles they ate every other Sunday. What they remember now isn't just how light and fresh it tasted or how the lemon cut through the richness of the butter. It's the glass baking dish, the lemon slices on top, the timer set so it wouldn't overcook. Her. Beef Burgundy sat on the most special Sunday tables in the 1950s when mothers wanted to make something fancy and French that they saw in a magazine or heard about from a neighbor, but still cooked in one pan without complicated steps. She made it in the big enameled Dutch oven, the one with the dark blue outside and the white inside, and the heavy lid that trapped every bit of steam and flavor. 3 pounds of beef chuck went in first, cut into 2-inch cubes and patted dry with paper towels so they would sear instead of steam. She seared them hard in hot oil in batches so the pan didn't get crowded and every piece turned dark brown and crusty on all sides. Then she pulled the beef out and set it on a plate while she cooked the vegetables in the same pot with all the drippings and brown bits stuck to the bottom. Sliced onions, sliced carrots, and sliced celery went in and cooked until they softened and started to brown. A tablespoon of tomato paste went in next and cooked for a minute until it smelled sweet and deep. Then she added 3 cloves of minced garlic and let that cook until it smelled sharp. A bottle of red wine went in and she scraped up all the browned bits from the bottom with a wooden spoon and let the wine simmer and reduce by half. The beef went back into the pot along with 2 cups of beef broth, a bay leaf, a sprig of fresh thyme, salt, and pepper. The lid went on tight, and the pot went into a 300-degree oven for 3 hours. Halfway through, she added a pound of whole button mushrooms and let them cook in the sauce for the last hour and a half. When it was done, the beef was so tender it fell apart when you touched it, and the sauce was thick and glossy and rich and dark. She served it straight from the Dutch oven into wide bowls with a side of buttered egg noodles or mashed potatoes to soak up the sauce. 12 people sat at the table that day because the pot was big enough to feed a crowd and nobody left hungry. What they remember now isn't just the flavor or the tenderness or how the wine made it taste expensive. It's the enameled Dutch oven, the bottle of red wine, the 12 plates. Sunday roast duck sat on the most elegant tables in the 1950s when mothers wanted to serve something rich and special that wasn't turkey or chicken but still roasted in one pan and didn't require culinary school training. She made it in the deep black roasting pan, the one with the rack inside that lifted the duck so the fat dripped down and didn't make the skin soggy. A 5-pound whole duck went on the rack, rinsed inside and out under cold water, and patted completely dry with paper towels, because any moisture left on the skin would keep it from crisping. She pricked the skin all over with a fork, so the fat could render out while it cooked, and then rubbed the outside with salt, pepper, and a little garlic powder. A quartered orange and a few sprigs of fresh thyme went inside the cavity to add flavor from the inside out. Quartered potatoes, thick carrot chunks, and halved onions went into the bottom of the pan under the rack and soaked up all the duck fat while everything cooked. The pan went into a 375-degree oven for 2.5 hours, and she didn't baste it because the fat rendered on its own and kept everything moist. Every 45 minutes, she pulled the pan out and poured off the accumulated fat from the bottom into a bowl because too much fat in the pan would smoke and splatter. The smell was rich and gamey and filled the house with something deeper and more complex than chicken or turkey. When it came out, the skin was dark and crispy and crackled when you touched it, and the meat underneath was tender and rich and dark. She let it rest on the counter for 15 minutes and then carved it at the table, slicing the breast meat thin and separating the legs and wings. The vegetables got piled onto a serving platter, and everyone took a little of everything. The flavor was intense and rich and unlike anything else they ate, and it felt like a special occasion even if it was just a regular Sunday. What they remember now isn't just the flavor or how crispy the skin was or how the orange and thyme made it taste fancy. It's the deep roasting pan, the pricked skin, the fat poured off. Her. These 25 Sunday dinners fed American families through the 1950s when mothers stood in kitchens with one pan and made something that mattered. Every pot roast, every roasted chicken, every pan of vegetables proved you didn't need fancy recipes or culinary training to feed the people you loved. Your grandmother made these dinners. Maybe your mother did too. They stood at the oven the way their mothers stood before them. Which one are you going to make this Sunday? Pick one. Just one. Go to your kitchen right now and pull out that roasting pan or Dutch oven sitting in the back of your cabinet. You already have what you need: a cut of meat, some potatoes, an onion. Put it in the pan. Put it in the oven. Let it cook while you do something else. Feed your family the way she fed hers. Now go. Make Sunday dinner. Make her proud.